Welcome to Nightfall Sleep Stories. As the day draws to a close, imagine stepping into a quiet room lit by the glow of a small fire. The air is calm, the gentle crackle of the hearth steady and reassuring. You sink into a comfortable chair wrapped in the hush of evening. Take a slow breath in, letting it fill your chest. Then breathe out and feel the weight of the day fall away. With each breath, your body softens. Shoulders grow heavy, hands rest easily, and your face smooths into calm. There is nothing you must do now, nowhere else you need to be. This moment is yours alone, safe, warm, and quiet. Allow your mind to settle like snow drifting gently to the ground. And when you are ready, we'll begin tonight's story. The evening tide rolled in with a gentle persistence, washing over the shoreline in hushed whispers. Leonidas stood at the edge of the coastal path, his weathered sandals sinking slightly into the damp sand. The journey had been long, but not arduous. A meandering path that had led him away from the clamor of the city and toward this quiet place where the sea met the sky in a seamless blend of blues and grays. The salt-laden breeze caressed his face, carrying with it the promise of rest and the subtle scent of pine from the nearby woods. He had arrived as the sun began its unhurried descent, casting long golden fingers across the water's surface. The small fishing village nestled against the hillside seemed to exhale as day turned to dusk, its whitewashed cottages glowing softly in the fading light. Smoke curled from a few chimneys, rising in lazy spirals before dissipating into the evening air. There was a tranquility here that Leonidas had been seeking, though he hadn't known it until this moment. A place where time seemed to move with the rhythm of the waves rather than the urgent beat of human endeavor. A wooden sign, weathered by countless seasons of sun and salt, pointed the way toward the village harbor. Leonidas adjusted the simple linen bag slung across his shoulder and began to walk, his footsteps leaving temporary impressions in the sand that the tide would soon reclaim. The distant cry of a seabird floated on the air, a solitary note in the gathering quiet, and as he moved toward the cluster of buildings ahead, the last rays of sunlight slipped below the horizon, and the night grew quieter. The path widened as Leonidas approached the village, transforming from sand to smooth stones worn by generations of feet. Small lanterns hung from posts along the way, their gentle flames dancing in glass enclosures, casting pools of warm light that guided his steps. To his right, the sea continued its eternal conversation with the shore, waves folding over themselves in a soothing cadence. The sound seemed to match his breathing, as if the ocean itself were showing him how to find calm after his journey. Leonidas paused to watch a small boat making its way back to harbor, its lantern swinging gently with each rise and fall of the water. The fishermen at the oars moved with unhurried purpose, each stroke a practiced motion that spoke of a lifetime spent in harmony with the sea. There was wisdom in such movements, Leonidas thought, the kind that came not from scrolls or teachers, but from the patient observation of natural rhythms. He found himself slowing his pace to match the oarsman's tempo, feeling no need to rush toward his destination. The path curved around a stand of olive trees, their silver-green leaves rustling softly in the evening breeze. Beyond them, stone steps led up to a small promontory where a structure stood silhouetted against the darkening sky. It was not tall or imposing, but something about its solitary position drew Leonidas's attention. A steady light shone from its uppermost point, rotating slowly to cast its beam across the water. A lighthouse, he realized, keeping watch over the hidden shoals and guiding vessels safely to shore. As he watched the light make another revolution, sweeping across the darkened sea like a gentle hand, Leonidas felt a sense of peace settle over him, and the night grew quieter. The lighthouse beckoned with its steady, unwavering light, and Leonidas found himself drawn toward it. The stone steps leading upward were smooth from years of use, their edges softened by time and the elements. He climbed at an unhurried pace, pausing occasionally to look back at the village below, where windows now glowed with lamplight, creating a constellation of warmth against the deepening blue of evening. The air grew cooler as he ascended, carrying the mingled scents of salt and wild thyme that grew in crevices between the rocks. As he neared the lighthouse, Leonidas noticed a small cottage nestled against its base, its windows illuminated with the same warm glow as the village homes below. A thin wisp of smoke rose from the chimney, bending slightly in the sea breeze before dissolving into the night air. The door of the cottage opened as he approached, spilling a rectangle of golden light onto the stone path. In the doorway stood a figure, an older man with a face as weathered as the coastal rocks, yet kind, with eyes that crinkled at the corners as if smiling were their natural state. The lighthouse keeper raised a hand in greeting, his posture neither guarded nor overly familiar, simply welcoming in the way of those accustomed to occasional visitors. He held a brass lantern in his other hand, its flame steady despite the evening breeze. The light caught the silver in his beard and the worn fabric of his simple clothes, lending him a timeless quality, as if he might have been standing in that doorway for 100 years, or merely a moment. Leonidas returned the greeting with a slight nod, feeling the tension of travel ease from his shoulders as the keeper stepped aside in silent invitation. Behind them, the great light of the lighthouse continued its patient rotation, and the night grew quieter. "The sea brings many travelers," the keeper said, his voice as smooth and deep as the harbor waters. He gestured toward a wooden chair near the hearth where a small fire provided both warmth and light. The interior of the cottage was simple but comfortable, with walls lined with shelves of books and curious objects collected from the shore. A table stood in the center, its surface scrubbed clean and set with 2 earthenware bowls and a loaf of bread still warm from baking. Leonidas settled into the offered chair, feeling the pleasant ache of a day's walking begin to soften. The keeper moved about the small space with the ease of long habit, pouring something fragrant from a kettle into clay cups. Steam rose in delicate spirals, carrying the scent of herbs and honey. When he handed a cup to Leonidas, their fingers briefly touched, a momentary connection that somehow acknowledged the shared humanity of host and guest, regardless of the different paths that had brought them to this place. "The bread was baked this morning," the keeper said, breaking the loaf and offering half to Leonidas. The crust crackled pleasantly as it broke, revealing a soft interior that released a cloud of warm, yeasty aroma. Beside the bread, the keeper placed a small dish of olives glistening with oil and a wedge of pale cheese. It was a simple meal, but one that spoke of care and attention to the rituals of hospitality. As they ate in companionable silence, the rhythmic sweep of the lighthouse beam created a gentle cadence, marking time in unhurried intervals, and the night grew quieter. The meal was unhurried, each bite savored in the comfortable silence that often exists between strangers who feel no need to fill the air with unnecessary words. The bread was indeed fresh, with a crust that yielded with a satisfying resistance, and an interior soft enough to soak up the golden olive oil the keeper had drizzled onto small plates between them. The olives were plump and briny, harvested from the very trees Leonidas had passed on his way up the path, and the cheese had the subtle tang of goat's milk, speaking of the hillside pastures visible in the distance. As they ate, the keeper occasionally rose to tend to the lighthouse lamp, adjusting its flame or checking that its rotation remained steady. These movements seemed less like interruptions and more like a natural extension of their shared evening, a reminder of the purpose that anchored the keeper to this place where land met sea. Leonidas watched these small rituals with appreciation, recognizing in them a devotion not unlike what he had once given to his own duties, though in a very different context and time. When the meal was complete, the keeper gathered the simple dishes and placed them in a basin of water. The soft clink of pottery and the gentle splash of water created a domestic melody that blended with the more distant rhythm of the waves. Outside, the moon had risen, casting a silver path across the water that seemed to lead from the horizon directly to the shore below them. Through the cottage window, this luminous trail was visible, a natural counterpart to the beam of light emanating from the lighthouse above. Leonidas felt a sense of balance in this observation, the human effort working in harmony with the greater patterns of the natural world. And the night grew quieter. Later, as the evening deepened into true night, Leonidas and the keeper sat by the hearth where the fire had burned down to a gentle glow of embers. The keeper had brought out a small wooden box containing sea glass in various hues, pieces of blue, green, and amber that had once been ordinary objects but had been transformed by their journey through the waves. Each piece was smooth to the touch, its edges rounded by countless tides, its surface bearing the frosted patina that only time and the patient work of water could create. "The sea changes what it touches," the keeper said, selecting a piece of deep blue glass and holding it up to catch the firelight. "Not by force, but by persistence." He placed the glass in Leonidas's palm, a small weight that somehow carried the vastness of the ocean's wisdom. Leonidas closed his fingers around it, feeling its coolness gradually warm to match his own temperature, a small but meaningful transformation. The keeper spoke occasionally of the lighthouse and its history, of the ships he had guided to safety over the years, and of the changing seasons as witnessed from this solitary outpost. His words flowed like the tide itself, sometimes advancing with stories, sometimes receding into contemplative silence. Leonidas listened, offering little of his own past, but finding that it mattered less here than it ever had before. What seemed important was not where he had been or what he had done, but simply that he was here now, present in this moment of shared humanity and quiet observation. As the keeper's stories ebbed and flowed, Leonidas felt something within himself beginning to shift, not dramatically but subtly, like sand rearranging itself beneath the water's gentle persuasion. The tensions he had carried, the weight of expectations both met and unmet, seemed less substantial in this place where the eternal rhythms of nature put human concerns into perspective. He realized that he had been seeking something without knowing what it was, and perhaps had found it in this unexpected encounter by the sea, and the night grew quieter. Morning would come, Leonidas knew, bringing with it decisions about continuing his journey or perhaps lingering in this peaceful village. But such thoughts belonged to tomorrow, not to this moment of stillness and reflection. The keeper had offered him a small room adjacent to the main living area, simply furnished with a narrow bed covered in clean linens that smelled of sunshine and salt air. Through its single window, the beam from the lighthouse swept periodically, a reassuring presence in the darkness. Leonidas sat on the edge of the bed, the piece of sea glass still in his hand. He placed it on the small table beside him, where it caught and held the passing light, momentarily glowing with an inner radiance before returning to its usual deep blue. The day's experiences settled in his mind like sediment in still water. The arrival at the shore, the path through the village, the lighthouse on the promontory, the keeper's quiet welcome, the shared bread and olives, the stories exchanged by firelight. Each memory had its own texture and weight, yet together they formed a coherent whole, a day unlike any other yet somehow timeless. He removed his sandals and placed them neatly beside the bed, then unfolded the simple blanket that had been provided. The fabric was soft against his skin, woven from local wool and bearing the subtle scent of lavender that grew wild on the hillsides. Outside, the continuous sound of waves against the shore provided a constant backdrop, neither demanding attention nor completely fading from awareness. A natural lullaby that had likely soothed countless sleepers in this coastal village over generations. As Leonidas lay back on the bed, he felt his body releasing the last of its tension, sinking into the mattress, as if returning to the earth itself. His breathing slowed to match the rhythm of the sea, each inhalation drawing in the cool night air, each exhalation releasing a small measure of the distance he had traveled to reach this place. The lighthouse beam swept through the darkness in its steady rotation, a metronome marking the passage of time, yet somehow also suggesting its irrelevance. In this moment, suspended between wakefulness and sleep, past and future seemed to recede, leaving only the present, this breath, this heartbeat, this awareness gradually dissolving into rest. And the night grew quieter. The first light of dawn was still hours away, but Leonidas had no need to measure the time. The gentle sounds of the keeper moving about in the main room had faded, replaced by the deeper quiet of a household at rest. Even the sea seemed to have moderated its voice, the waves breaking against the shore in softer, more measured intervals. The lighthouse continued its patient vigil, its beam now competing with the silver light of the moon that had risen higher in the night sky, casting long shadows across the floor of the small room. Leonidas felt himself drifting toward sleep, not fighting against it, but allowing it to approach at its own pace. His thoughts, which had so often raced ahead to the next day's challenges, or lingered on the previous day's events, now moved as slowly and smoothly as clouds across the night sky. There was no hurry here, no deadline to meet, no expectation to fulfill beyond the simple act of being present in this moment of transition from wakefulness to dreams. As sleep drew nearer, the boundaries between Leonidas and his surroundings seemed to soften. The sound of his breathing merged with the rhythm of the waves. The warmth of his body beneath the blanket became indistinguishable from the ambient warmth of the room, and the weight of his limbs against the mattress felt like an extension of the earth itself. In this gentle dissolution of the self, there was no loss, but rather an expansion, a recognition of connection to something larger and more enduring than individual experience. The last thing Leonidas was aware of before sleep claimed him completely was the distant call of a night bird, a single clear note that hung in the air like a question briefly posed and then answered by the continuing hush of the waves. And as consciousness gave way to the deeper waters of sleep, Leonidas carried with him the peace he had found by the quiet sea, where time moved according to natural rhythms, and even the most weathered objects were transformed, not by force, but by the patient persistence of the tides. And the night grew quieter still, cradling him in its embrace until morning light would once again touch the eastern horizon.